President JD Vance is saying the FBI search of John Bolton's home was, quote, not at all driven by Trump seeking revenge for Bolton's frequent criticisms. His comment came in an interview with NBC News shortly after federal agents appeared at Bolton's Maryland home and his Washington, D.C. office. Sources say the searches were tied to Bolton's handling of classified documents. Bolton served as national security advisor for 17 months during President Trump's first term in office. He has since become an outspoken critic of the president. Mr. Bolton's appeared many times on this program, and we've talked through all kinds of issues with him. Julia Benbrook is at the White House. Julia, take us behind the scenes at the White House. What more do we know about these searches and what motivated them?
Well, Jessica, the FBI carried out a court-authorized search of John Bolton's Bethesda home as well as his D.C. office on Friday. And at the center of the Justice Department's reopened probe is the question of whether President Donald Trump's former national security advisor and now staunch critic broke the law when he shared what the Trump administration officials believe was classified information with people not authorized to have it. But the probe, originally opened in 2020, was closed, and a related lawsuit was dropped in 2021 when the department was under then President Joe Biden. Now, the public nature of this search has led some to question if it could be a form of political retribution. Many top administration officials were posting about the search as it happened and just drawing more attention to it. In that interview with NBC, Vice President JD Vance ruled out the possibility of this search being politically motivated and instead characterized it as a part of an evidence-gathering operation. Take a listen.
We are investigating Ambassador Bolton, but if they ultimately bring a case, it will be because they determine that he has broken the law. We're going to be careful about that. We're going to be deliberate about that.
Now, Trump was asked several times to comment on the search on Friday. He said that he knew nothing about it and that he didn't want to be involved in it. But he also took the opportunity to criticize Bolton. Important background information here. Trump did fire Bolton in 2019. The two have really been at odds since. And then during his first term, Trump even threatened to jail Bolton after, in his book, the one that is in question here, that Bolton claimed that Trump was woefully underinformed when it comes to foreign policy and that he was obsessed with shaping his media legacy. Jessica?
All right, Julia Benbrook at the White House with the latest. Thank you so much. And we are joined now by Andrew McCabe, senior CNN law enforcement analyst and former deputy director of the FBI. Andy, thanks for being here so much. I want to start first with, based on what we know about this investigation, if you believe there's a credible concern here.
Well, there's a couple of things I think that point to a possibly a credible concern, and that's specifically the fact that we know that the enforcement operations yesterday, that's the search warrant at Bolton's residence and a separate search warrant at Bolton's office, residence being in Maryland, office being in Washington, D.C. In both instances, the FBI agents who conducted those searches had to have a search warrant, which means they had to go before a federal magistrate judge and present evidence to convince that judge that there is probable cause to believe that there is evidence of a crime in both of those locations. Now, because those are different jurisdictions, they had to make those presentations to two separate judges. So both judges decided that that DOJ and the FBI had met that expectation, met that threshold. So there is something to these searches. Now, I should say, we don't know what the FBI recovered, if anything. We certainly don't know if John Bolton will ever be charged with a crime. That's not happened yet. And even if he is charged with a crime, I'm sure Mr. Bolton will have all kinds of defenses. So we can't get ahead of ourselves here, but the action that we saw yesterday was authorized by a court. So there is something to that.
Okay, so knowing that, help people understand what kind of information would the FBI need to get those search warrants? What kind of information are they presenting to get a judge to sign off on that?
Sure, great question. So the potential offense here, we know, is the unlawful retention or distribution of classified material. So essentially taking classified material and giving it to someone who's not authorized to have it. So the evidence that you're looking for there is some sort of proof that there is likely classified material in those locations. Now, that proof could take all kinds of different forms. Maybe somebody was in those locations and saw a document or something on a computer and then told the authorities about it. Or it's possible that they have used grand jury subpoenas or other process to look at Mr. Bolton's email history. And in that email history, they may have seen him sending documents that they think might be classified. So all of I just cite, we don't know what evidence they had, but those are just two examples of different kinds of proof that you could use to take before a judge and say, look, judge, we see him. We have a record here from the service provider. He sent an email on this date. We know there's a document attached to it. The title of the document is something classified. We think that classified document might be at the house. That's the sort of argument that you would make.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Okay, so at the same time these FBI agents were conducting their search, the Bureau's Director Kash Patel sent out a tweet reading, "No one is above the law, FBI agents on a mission." Is there does that risk making this political? Is that an appropriate tweet to be sending out at that moment?
Yeah, so here's where we see what happened yesterday really kind of go off the rails. Agents going before a judge, getting a search warrant, going to arrest. This is the kind of thing that the FBI does all the time. This is what they do. What they don't do, what FBI directors typically would never do, is draw public attention to a search warrant that's being executed while that execution is in place. This is the kind of work that you want to do very quietly. You want to minimize the level of embarrassment and attention to the person who lives at the residence. You also don't want to attract the public and the media out to a place where agents are working. That can create all sorts of risks. So I think those texts that we saw from Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and Dan Bongino yesterday were inappropriate, potentially dangerous, and really a concerning departure from what's long time been considered protocol by every FBI director and attorney general, not just Republican or Democrat specific.
Yeah, and then you had the president himself making very disparaging comments about Bolton publicly, after this had happened, but also previously as well. No love lost there. How does that factor into all of this?
Yeah, so if Mr. Bolton is charged and this case goes forward to a prosecution, he's going to have, I'm sure, a lot of defenses in fighting those charges. Certainly, one of them might be he may claim that this was all political, that this was vindictive. There's a motion you can make for vindictive prosecution or selective prosecution. And if he does, he'll be pointing to all those statements that people like President Trump made yesterday. President Trump, in one hand, in the same comment, said that he would be getting briefed on the case yesterday, but then said, but I tell people I don't want to know anything about it. So that's kind of impossible to get a brief and not know anything about it. But every time he or one of his people speaks about this now ongoing criminal inquiry, they raise that specter of political influence and, improper use of resources to take advantage of or achieve some sort of vindication against political rivals. And that is not good for the process. It's not good for the prosecution. I would say even JD Vance's comments about the case yesterday were too much. Typically, presidents and vice presidents don't comment on ongoing criminal cases for exactly this reason. If asked about them, the only really acceptable response is to defer questions to the Justice Department and not engage. But that's not how this administration, conducts themselves.
Yeah. All right, Andrew McCabe, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
And John Bolton became an intense critic of the president after he was fired back in 2019. And President Trump has since called him many names. CNN's Tom Foreman shows you their complicated history.
Like a very quiet person, except on television, if you could say something bad about Trump. Not a smart guy, but He could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out.
President Donald Trump's beef with John Bolton has been stewing for years, especially after Bolton's 2020 book described Trump as stunningly uninformed, obsessed with his image, and bumbling through relations with North Korea, China, Russia, and more.
He doesn't operate on the basis of grand strategy or even policy. He operates on the basis of what's good for Donald Trump.
With the 2020 election looming, Trump immediately attacked.
He released massive amounts of classified and confidential but classified information. That's illegal, and you go to jail for that.
It wasn't always that way. Back when Trump first took the White House, Bolton, who had worked for every Republican president since Ronald Reagan, cheered the incoming commander-in-chief, in particular for building up the military. Trump eventually tapped Bolton to be his national security advisor.
And I have other people that are a little more dovish than him. And ultimately, I make the decision. No, I like John. I get very good advice from John.
But soon the two were clashing over North Korea, Afghanistan, and the general chaos of Trump's orbit, in which Bolton wrote work was like executing policy inside a pinball machine. Trump would come to see Bolton as too hawkish.
I'd be with foreign leaders, and I didn't even have to act tough because they said, look, that moron, John Bolton, he's crazy.
A bitter split followed, with Trump's Justice Department launching an investigation into Bolton, which was dropped by the Biden administration and revived in this new Trump term. Bolton has become a media fixture, relentlessly calling out his old boss, even just days ago after the administration touted its Ukraine summit in Alaska.
I think Trump did not lose, but Putin clearly won.
Of course, there are disputes about whether or not this book was ever officially approved to be published in the first place and whether or not there are any secrets involved. But there are also disputes about what is actually happening here. People on the right, in some cases, are saying, yeah, maybe they're going to find something. Maybe Bolton did do something wrong and he should be pursued legally. And then there are people on the other side of the political equation who say, no, this is really about Donald Trump getting more retribution and sending a message to anyone who dares to cross him.